I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And welcome back to Rob and Nate Record a Podcast.
So we did an episode last year called Movie Goals. And my movie goal for 2020 was to watch at least one film from every year from 1930 through 2020. And I accomplished this goal. And it inspired me to set my movie goal for 2021, which is watch more television. It was going out of your way to find films based on basically the sole criteria of the year in which they were released. It's an interesting way to watch movies. Sometimes it works. Oftentimes you're scouring Amazon to see what's free from 1937 or whatever year and what's short. And so you don't always
Why what's short?
I don't know. Sometimes if you're looking through things and there's nothing you super want to see, you're like, okay, just something that's short to get that done. So we're going to go through as quick as I can. This will be a little bit of a challenge. See if we can get this in less than an hour. Okay. Just me briefly talking about the first film from every given calendar year that I watched during the course of 2020. Some of these, there was a little bit of personal judgment involved because maybe they came out in England in one year but not in the United States until another year, or they were produced and premiered at a film festival that didn't get a theatrical release until later. So I took some liberties in that. I'm going to just kind of...
You also sometimes take the liberty of it was filmed in a certain year.
Sometimes, yeah. It's just whatever it strikes me as the year that this movie is from, or whatever is most convenient for me to think of this as the year that the movie is from. I'm going to assume that in the great majority of these, you have not seen it. So,
there was some that, as we discussed this as you did it, I had seen.
So chime in when we come on something that you're familiar with. Otherwise, I'll assume that you will not have seen it. And rather than doing any kind of complicated scoring system on a 4 to 10 scale, I'm just going to give things a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Okay.
So are we ready?
Absolutely.
1930, Madame Satan is a musical set in partially on a Zeppelin. And it was done by Cecil B. DeMille. I will be doing most of these. My goal is to not even look at my computer. Doing most of this off of memory. So this film is not good. The music is not very good. It's kind of flat. The sequence with the costume party on the Zeppelin is very memorable, especially when the Zeppelin, something happens to it and everybody has to jump off of the Zeppelin in their costumes on parachutes. That sequence is awesome. Watch those 6 minutes and skip the rest of this movie, unless you're a completist. So I'm giving a thumbs down to Madame Satan. 1931, Nightlife in Reno. This is about a couple that go to Reno to get divorced and then fall back in love. It's from some forgotten studio. I'm probably actually going to give it a... This is on the border.
Thumbs sideways?
I don't know if I can do thumbs sideways. I'm going to say thumbs up Well, no. I'm going to have to say thumbs down. It's kind of interesting to see Reno in 1931 where it's legal to gamble but not legal to drink.
So, slight question. You're so hesitant. Recording this, it was apparent you had not fully made up your mind. Thumbs up or thumbs down?
No.
I thought you would have known all your thumbs up, thumbs down by now.
Some of these are pretty clear, and some of these are kind of.
So this makes me wonder if you don't go back and forth on the thumbs up and thumbs down.
I do on occasion. Yeah. I'm gonna have to say, I don't. This one's really tough because right now I want to give it a thumbs up again, but it's very close. It's like a 51-49 thing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to actually give it a thumbs up because I don't think most of the ones from the 30s were very good. So we're going to give it a thumbs up.
This sounds like a thumb sideways.
Okay, thumbs sideways. 1932, Tangled Destinies. This one's definitely a thumbs down. It's from another studio I had never heard of before, and it's a group of 9 people. They're on a plane, and the plane has to make an emergency landing in the desert somewhere, and they find this abandoned mansion, conveniently, to stay for the night because there's a storm and somebody's murdered. And it's just very Agatha Christie, but not very good Agatha Christie. So that's a thumbs down. 1933 Deluge is a thumbs up. This is a disaster movie on an epic scale. There's some kind of, I forget if it was a meteor or what it was, something messes up with the magnetic pull of the earth, and it's 2012 kind of, just about everybody dies, and it's about some survivors, and it's pretty good, and the special effects were so good that they were reused into the 1940s and 50s in films. They would just cut these 1933 graphics out and just insert them. The water overflowing cities, things like that. So it works as spectacle. It's a fairly conventional plot in terms of the survivors of the disaster. 1934, Chloe, Love Is Calling You is a film that has not aged well. It's rather awkward. It's about a lady who is raised to think she is a light-skinned black woman, but she is actually the child of a plantation owner who loves his mint juleps. He drinks multiple mint juleps all over the film, and it's just racially awkward and confused, and it's kind of uncomfortable. And I'm going to have to give it a thumbs down. 1935, She. This film stars Helena Gahagan Douglas, who at the time was Helena Gahagan and later would marry the actor Melvyn Douglas. Helena Gahagan Douglas would have a political career. She was a congresswoman. She ran for Senate in 1950 against Richard Nixon. She was the one who coined the term tricky dick.
Wow.
But before that, she was a singer, and she starred in this one film. This was her only film. She was the lead. She plays an immortal, beautiful woman who lives in kind of a Shangri-La type place, and this expedition finds her. This is based on a novel that's been made into a film like 6 or 7 times. And this was a huge disaster. They put a whole lot of money in this film, and this film did not work. It was not a successful film. It is a thumbs down. 1936, Charlie Chan at the Circus. I'm going to give it a thumbs up. It's a pleasant little Charlie Chan film. Again, also kind of racially difficult because it's a Swede playing a Chinese person. Mm-hmm. They would have called him Chinaman at the time. Yeah. But it's pleasant, as is Charlie Chan at the Olympics, 1937, which includes footage actually filmed at the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. The studio got nervous about the Nazi connotation, and so every time there's a swastika, it's just a blur. They literally fudged out all of the swastikas in the film. And this is in 37, so this is before the wars even started. They're like, Nazis, not so much. 1938, Holiday is a really, really good film. I remember talking to you about this. This is Cary Grant, Katharine Hepburn. Cary Grant is a man who doesn't come from wealth, but he was a very shrewd investor, and he made a lot of wealth on his own by the time he's like 30. And he meets this girl who turns out to be from an extremely wealthy family. And he wants to marry her, but then he wants to just kind of give up working and just do fun stuff because he's denied himself fun. And there's a bit of a love triangle. I forget the actress who plays the sister, or who plays the woman that Cary Grant has fallen for. But her sister's played by Katharine Hepburn, and they are really more compatible. And so the thing is, how is this love triangle going to resolve itself? It's very good. And it is a film that, had I seen it in the 90s, it would have been a film that I was constantly showing people.
Yeah.
Because it's just really charming, and it works, and I loved it. At some point, I may have to show you this movie. 1939 animated version of Gulliver's Travels by Max Fleischer. You've probably seen footage of it. It's fairly realistic, at least for the time in its animation. But it's also really flat. It's just, technically it's an achievement, but as far as the story, it's pretty dull.
Yeah.
So that is a thumbs down. Holiday, of course, was a thumbs up. All This in Heaven 2 is a kind of a gothic romance based loosely on a true story about an American, basically she's an au pair in, I want to say, France, and the person that she is nannying for their children, his wife dies, and I think maybe he killed the wife. I forget. It's been so, I saw this early part of the year.
Yeah.
Charles Boyer is the man that hires Betty Davis as the au pair. This one is also kind of borderline. I'm going to have to give it a thumbs down, though, because I've seen just too many gothic romances this year. Bugville is a film also by the Fleischer Movies, 1941. It's an animated film about a colony of bugs whose little piece of garden land in New York City is about to be developed, and they need to move their location. And there's a grasshopper who's in love with a bee, and there's this beetle that's like trying to manipulate everybody in the community. And they're building the skyscraper, and there's like a garden space on the top of the skyscraper, and can we get all the way up there and not get squashed? And the scale of the bugs versus the people walking around is pretty impressive, but it's really a pretty mediocre movie.
Yeah.
This was a movie that had the unfortunate release date of December the 5th, 1941.
Wow.
So it got lost in the shuffle and
Yeah.
basically closed, I want to say it was MGM's feature animation department.
Wow.
And this was very early after Snow White. This was supposed to be, this and Gulliver's Travels were like the two that they put out. And Gulliver's Travels made money, but Bug Bill, I do not believe made money.
Huh.
1942, George Washington Slept Here. You ever see The Money Pit?
Yeah.
It's basically The Money Pit.
Okay.
Jack Benny, his wife, gets a house, and the big selling point is that George Washington had supposedly slept in the house. And they're going to move out to the country, but everything that can go wrong does go wrong, and there's questions about the property lines. And eventually they found out that it was not George Washington who slept in this house. It was Benedict Arnold.
Wow.
It's fun. That gets a thumbs up. 1943, Stormy Weather. It's an all-black musical, major studio musical. It's got Lena Horne in it. It's pleasant. It's mostly interesting in that this was an all-black musical with a studio budget that was a big hit.
Yeah.
And in and of itself, it's not great, but the musical numbers are well staged and it's historically important, so I'm giving it a thumbs up. Jane Eyre, another Gothic romance. This one I'm going to give the thumbs up out of the multiple Gothic romances I saw this year. Also, not Bette Davis. I want to say Joan Fontaine. And Orson Welles. Orson Welles is suitably creepy in it. 1945, Wonder Man, the second film to star Danny Kaye.
Yeah.
It's basically, Danny Kaye plays twins, and one of the twins is killed by like the mob.
Okay.
And the ghost of Danny Kaye comes back and, of course, possesses the other Danny Kaye.
Uh-huh.
And both Danny Kays have love interests. And so he's juggling the multiple love interests that thinks he's the other person. And it's confusing, but it's fun.
Yeah.
And it's also in color. So thumbs up to Wonder Man. Cloak and Dagger, 1946, is Gary Cooper is a scientist this is just before World War II, and he goes to Switzerland to try to bring back this physicist who's a colleague of his and get him away from the Nazis. And I forget the girl who plays the girl in the film, but she's really good. I'll have to see more with her in it. It's solid. It's good espionage stuff. My Favorite Brunette, 1947. This is Bob Hope, is a baby photographer whose office is next door to a private detective's. And he gets mistaken for the private detective by a beautiful girl, so he decides to take on the case, and then he gets in way over his head.
Yeah.
It's super conventional Bob Hope. Mild thumbs up. Sitting Pretty, 1948. This is the Mr. Belvedere character. They made the series in the 80s, here played by Clifton Webb. It's conventional. It feels like a sitcom, but it's fun, and it's a perfect character for Clifton Webb. He'd go back and play Mr. Belvedere in a couple more films in the 40s and 50s, so I'm thumbing that one up. 1949's Ride, Ryder, Ride, which is a Red Ryder film, which I saw principally to say I'd seen a Red Ryder film. We know them mostly from the references in A Christmas Story.
Yeah.
In which it is, I think it was a radio show, but it was originally a comic.
Yeah.
And it really feels like a comic. Like they've got the little Indian boy in the stereotypical dress, and then you got the prospector character. And it's very much a Saturday morning serial kind of film.
Yeah.
I mean, it is like a Sunday comic strip. That is the level of depth that it has. And so I would recommend, if you grew up watching A Christmas Story, to see a Red Ryder film, just to say you've seen one. But it really has nothing to it. I'm going to give that a thumbs down. 1950, Kon-Tiki, which won the Best Documentary Award, Oscars, for 1950, which is a true story about Thor Heyerdahl's expedition. They built a boat and sailed it from South America and just kind of followed the ocean currents until they wound up on an island to prove that that's how those islands could have been populated. This has parallels in certain Mormon beliefs, even though that's never directly addressed in the film. But it's just really fascinating. They brought this camera equipment. They did not have sound equipment, so all the narration is imposed later. But it's just fascinating to see how they lived. And they just were kind of at sea for 60 some odd days until they collided with an island, and their timing was good because there was a kid that had like appendicitis or something, and one of them knew enough to be able to remove the appendix and like save this kid's life. Wow. And if it hadn't been for them ending up by pure chance of timing and ocean current, this kid would have died, which is kind of fascinating. That's a big thumbs up, and it's also short. It's less than an hour long. 1951 Royal Wedding, which is a color musical. It's got Fred Astaire in it. It's set to Queen Elizabeth's wedding, is supposed to be kind of the background event. And I knew a girl that I worked with close to 20 years ago who absolutely loved this movie, and so it had always kind of been on my list, but I thought it's Sea Singing in the Rain. Yeah. It's like it's just kind of there. There's some neat musical numbers, but there's not a lot to it. Invasion USA, so that's thumbs down. Invasion USA 1952, also a thumbs down film. It's about a communist invasion of the United States, which turns out to be a dream of these people in a bar, because this mysterious guy comes in and just like, would you have what it takes to stand up to the communists? And then they dream that the communists take over. And it's very much an artifact of its time, and it's not very good. 1953, Beat the Devil. John Huston directed film set in coastal Italy or Sicily. Humphrey Bogart and a group of kind of reprobate people, including Sidney Greenstreet and Peter Lorre, I think, end up on a boat. They're kind of trying to con these guys, but they're also working with them, and they're trying to get some radium or something. It's a real kind of convoluted plot, and it's really just about these eccentric characters, and it feels like they needed more of a story. A film that it's sometimes likened to is Ocean's 11, both the original Rat Pack and the one from 2001, and it's a bunch of people that enjoy each other's company coming up with an excuse to make a movie on location.
Yeah.
And there's really not a lot to it. So I'm going to thumbs down Beat the Devil. 1954, Man in the Attic is a Jack the Ripper story with Jack Palance.
Okay.
Pretty good. And Jack Palance is a scientist, is a doctor. He's actually doing legitimate medical research, but he's also killing women.
Yeah.
And he's renting a room from this couple, and he ends up falling in love with their daughter. And the wife is Aunt Bee from the Andy Griffith Show, and she's the first person to figure out that he's Jack the Ripper, and nobody believes her. He's Jack the Ripper! No, Aunt Bee, he ain't. So that gets a thumbs up. 1955, Canyon Crossroads, which I saw mostly because it was filmed in Moab.
Yeah.
Would be a Western. It is a Western, but it's contemporary Western about claim jumping for radium or uranium rather than gold.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where this girl ends up trapped in this cave, and the guy has to go, and I forget the name of the actor, but he's the guy in Knight Rider who built the Knight Rider machine.
Yeah.
Who shows up on the episodes, but 30 years earlier. And so he has to go and get help. And he does get help and save her, but this character died of cancer because she was stuck in the uranium cave overnight.
Yeah.
It's not very good. But it's kind of neat to see Moab in 1955 when there was freaking nothing there.
How did it compare to your recent trip down there?
Unrecognizable.
Yeah.
I was hoping to see that there's this club they go into that looks like it might have been made out of an old army barracks. And I'm like, I hope that thing still exists. But I did not see it. And it would have been on the main strip.
We might have been able to search it out. Well, the main strip has changed through Moab over the years.
Like it's a different road now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe it's further back.
Yeah.
But this is a bad movie. I'm going to give it a thumbs down. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the original from 1956. Thumbs up.
Yeah.
Way good. I also saw the 78 version. But the 56 version it's just really good. Like, people always talk about the Cold War parallel, and it's there. But it goes beyond it. It's just a good, creepy movie.
Yeah.
1957, Account Rendered. I saw this movie like the day of or the day after Honor Blackman died, because Honor Blackman is in this movie. She was Bond girl.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie is only like 58 minutes long. I think it was called a quota quickie, that in the English film industry you had to make X number of British films and actually show them in the theater. But they mostly wanted the American films, so sometimes these films would be just short things to slap on as a double feature. and it's just completely forgettable, kind of a murder mystery, love triangle thing, and it's bad. Thumbs down. In 1958, we've already done an episode on.
Yeah.
Run Silent, Run Deep.
Yep.
Which is great.
It's a very good film.
Very good. And it's one I've been thinking about revisiting.
I revisited that recently. I got my wife to watch it with me.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
And she enjoyed it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I enjoyed it every bit as much.
Yeah. And I watched another submarine film recently, and I kept thinking about... no, actually, it was when we watched the Tom Hanks World War...
Yeah, Greyhound.
And I kept thinking I'd rather be watching Run Silent, Run Deep.
Yeah, we had disagreements on Greyhound.
On that. 1959, Cuban Rebel Girls.
Okay.
This is a movie that Errol Flynn made with his teenage mistress in Cuba before everybody knew that Fidel Castro was a communist. And it's total Fidel Castro propaganda. And it's about Cuban rebel girls. And it is awful, and I don't recommend it, but I also totally recommend it.
How much was this influenced by us having already watched an Errol Flynn movie this year?
Probably a little bit. There is a film about Errol Flynn called The Last of Errol Flynn, about his relationship with the teenage girl, because he liked him super young. And one of the reasons he wanted to film this movie and make a movie in Cuba is because their age of consent laws were different.
Yeah.
And so he could be more open with her there than he could if he was filming in the United States.
Yeah.
It's a bad movie.
Yeah.
In 1960, Never on Sunday has a song, whatever the Greek of Never on Sunday is, won the best song Oscar that year. And it's about a guy who's, I forget what he does, but he's very procedural and by the book, and he falls in love with a prostitute and wants to reform her, and it's not very good. I did not care for Never on Sunday. Thumbs down. 1961, Blue Hawaii.
Yeah.
Which I would take over Aloha any day. Even though Blue Hawaii is not very good, this is another one that's kind of borderline. I'm going to have to give it a thumbs down.
Did you watch this to appease your sister?
Yeah, in part.
Yeah.
We'll there's a better Elvis movie I have in my mind that we will have to do a standalone at some point. There are some things that I liked about this film, but it's really silly. You get to see Angela Lansbury doing a Southern accent because she's Elvis's mom, and her and Elvis's dad went to Hawaii because they worked for the Dole Pineapple people. And actually, now I want to give this a thumbs up. because it's just such a stupid movie, and it's a bit. So this was filmed just after Elvis got back from military service, and so he plays a guy coming back from his military service in Germany, and he doesn't even go to his girl. He meets his girl at the airport, and then they drive off to the beach because he's got a bunch of a half dozen Hawaiian people that are his best friends. They got to go surfing first thing, and it's just so silly. So it has no substance, but thumbs up. I guess thumbs up. And there's this girl in it he's trying to, he doesn't want to get into the family business, the pineapple business. He ends up deciding, I'm going to get into the tourist business. And so he gets this tour group of these young girls, and of course the young girls are gaga for Elvis. And one of them that's 15, 16, very, it's underage. So Elvis I'm not having anything to do with this girl even though she's really into me. And this actress, and because I'm not doing this looking at a computer, I forget her name, but she and her husband were murdered in the early 1980s. Sometimes the most fascinating things about not very good movies is the real things that end up happening to people that were involved in the movie. So that is more memorable than anything that happens on screen in Blue Hawaii. 1962, The Day of the Triffids. Triffids are plants from outer space that are carnivorous, and there's a comet that comes by and it blinds everybody who looks at the comet. So only people that were asleep or not looking at the comet or were in a hospital can still see, and they're trying to survive as the carnivorous plants hunt down the survivors. If you've never seen The Walking Dead, because The Walking Dead steals the first episode from Triffids, only instead of Triffids, they're zombies.
Yeah. And
there's a 1980 miniseries, which I'd seen before, based on the same book, which is good. And there was another miniseries version they did in the early 2000s, which I've not seen, which is supposedly also good. But the Day of the Triffids movie is bad.
Yeah.
It's just, there's just nothing there. And they add this subplot about this bickering husband and wife scientist. And I don't know why that's there. And it's bad. So thumbs down. 1963, The Terror. This is a Roger Corman film. It's got Boris Karloff in it, of course. It's got young Jack Nicholson in it. This was the film that they filmed on sets that were being taken down from another film. Like they had a weekend.
Yeah.
And then they had to do all these extra shots out on the beach and elsewhere. And Francis Ford Coppola was one of the people that like shot several weeks of this film because they were just trying to piece together a movie and they didn't even really have a plot, and so it doesn't make any sense. At the end, you got Dick Miller who has to give all this exposition to explain what you've been watching for the last 70 minutes, and it's horrible, and I don't recommend it. Thumbs down. 1964, we also did an episode about earlier this year. Father Goose.
Yep, that was a good one.
Father Goose gets an enthusiastic thumbs up.
Yep.
1965, The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, based on a Leclerc novel. It's got Richard Burton, who plays an American agent who pretends to be on the outs with his government and potentially a sellout, but he's actually doing a double cross, so he's pretending to defect, but somebody else has got kind of caught into this, and he's trying to get her out. It's pretty solid.
Yeah.
I need to listen to more audiobooks or read more books or see more movies by Leclerc. I also like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which we talked about off of the podcast. So I would give a thumbs up to Spy Who Came In From the Cold. 1966, The Sand Pebbles, enthusiastic thumbs up, directed by Robert Wise. It stars Wanted Dead or Alive, The Great Escape, The Towering Inferno.
It's not coming to me. Steve McQueen.
Steve McQueen is an American soldier who's on basically a PT boat in the rivers in China in the 1920s, when the whole world was basically kind of, the Western world anyway, had kind of carved China up into sectors and had commercial interests there. And the United States didn't really have a sector per se, but they had commercial interests. And so they had this PT boat, and Sir Richard Attenborough is in it, and he falls in love with a Chinese girl. And it's actually really excellent. I highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. Very, very good. I don't know what the word I'm grasping for. There's a word I'm grasping for with it, but it very much lives up to, if not exceeds, the quality of The Great Escape. 1967, Hurry Sundown. This is Otto Preminger's The South Was Racist film, set in the post-war years about a black and a white family, and they were kind of friends, but they're also competing because there's a thing about selling their land for a development project, and they'll only buy the land if both sell, but the black family doesn't want to be kind of harassed out of their land. And it's got Jane Fonda in it. It's got Faye Dunaway in it in a very early role. Michael Caine. It's got a really good cast, but it's not very good. I wanted to see it for a long time, but it's hard to come by, and now I know why, because it's not very good.
Yeah.
1968, Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, I remember you talking about this.
Rosemary's Baby is incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, it is really creepy. Spawn of Satan, and the great mood piece, and Mia Farrow is excellent in it. Thumbs up. Thumbs up to Goodbye Columbus, 1969, based on a novella by Philip Roth. This stars Richard Benjamin, who would also appear in the film version of Portnoy's Complaint, another Roth novel that was made several years later. This is about a man who's a librarian who's just returned from his military service in the 50s, and he has some family that's better off financially than him that have a place out on Long Island, and they invite him to come visit for the summer. And he falls in love with Ally McGraw, who comes from another Jewish family, but they've kind of they put on WASP airs. They've arrived financially, and they fall in love. But is it going to work, or is it doomed because they have the class barriers? And there's a scene at the brother's wedding. It's like 40 minutes long, and it's just joyful. It's about a wedding. It just goes on, and the reception, and the relatives, and it's just great. I love this movie. It's strangely forgotten because it was like a top 10 moneymaker in 1969. And you've probably never heard of it. And it's really good. So enthusiastic thumbs up for Goodbye Columbus. Rio Lobo, 1970. This is the second remake of Rio Bravo. Howard Hawks' career was really going nowhere, so he would make a couple duds, and then he'd remake Rio Bravo, and then make a couple duds, and then he'd remake Rio Bravo. I can't not like it, even though I've seen it before. So this is a marginal one. You could really basically throw out the first 40 minutes, but once they get to the town, once they have to have the shootout in the town, it's fun. Marginal thumbs up. 1971, Fata Morgana. This is we did a month for him. Werner Herzog.
Oh, okay.
It is footage of decay in North Africa with South American scriptures read over it.
Wow.
It's kind of random, and it's industrial decay, and it's natural decay, and there's a scene where they go into this like nightclub in Algeria or something, and the audio commentary is probably more interesting.
Yeah.
It's just a weird assemblage that I don't quite know what to make of, but it's less a movie than it is something that would be running on a loop in an art museum. So as a movie, I'm going to have to give it thumbs down.
Seems appropriate for Werner Herzog.
Yeah. 1972, A Thief in the Night. This is a Christian film about the rapture. It's one of a series. If you see one, probably see this one, because basically it's left behind on an extreme budget, made in Iowa, I think. 1973, The Conflict is really good. This was made for, I think, Irish television, and it's based on a novel that takes as its premise, it's set in what's implied to be the 1990s. Mm-hmm. And so the idea behind this film is that the Vatican II reforms they didn't stop. There was no John Paul II to reconservatize the church. You just had a bunch of liberal popes, and eventually your priests are just wearing a suit and tie, and they're only wearing the vestments when they're performing a wedding. And the church has gotten so liberal and that it's alienated a lot of its membership. And there's this monastery on an island off the coast of Ireland that has started holding the now forbidden Latin Mass. And so Martin Sheen is sent from the Vatican as a young American priest to go there to try to convince the priests to stop doing it because they're causing a rupture in the church. And so he has to convince the lead monk, the abbot, to make a decision. And this abbot could really go either way. It's really good. It's really thought-provoking.
Yeah, you've talked about this one before.
1974, Hearts and Minds. This is a documentary about the Vietnam War. It's really solid. And it's got this sequence at the end where they show, the point is that Vietnam was a mistake, but it also wants to say that there are people that sincerely think it wasn't, and that they shouldn't just be dismissed, which is wise. And there's certain parallels to modern politics, certainly. So thumbs up to Hearts and Minds, as with The Conflict. A Boy and His Dog, I'm going to give a thumbs up to. This is a science fiction film with young Don Johnson. There's been World War III, and he's in the ruins, and he has a telepathic connection to his dog, who teaches him things. And they're basically wandering around. He's trying to find women to
repopulate.
Repopulate. Yes, that's what his goal is. And he gets abducted by this group that live in a community underground, but he gets separated by his dog from his dog. And his dog's like, "Stay away from these people. Don't trust them." And they lure him down there under the pretense that you're going to be used to repopulate because we're sterile down here, so we need new sources of genetic code. And they do want to use him for that, but not in the way that he had planned. It's not pleasant. It's a really weird, kind of dark film, but so different that I would recommend it. 1976, Murder by Death. This is a spoof where they assemble basically versions of famous mystery characters. You've got a Sam Spade figure, you've got a Charlie Chan figure, you've got a Miss Marple figure, and they are lured by the guy who wrote In Cold Blood, Truman Capote.
Oh, yeah.
Truman Capote assembles them there to solve a mystery. This one is also a borderline. I probably would have given it a thumbs up at the time, but as I think about it, like there's just so little that really stays with me about it now that it's almost like I haven't seen it. So I'm going to give it a thumbs down. 1977 was a film that I wanted to do a standalone episode on. I was very enthusiastic when I first saw it. It's a movie called Superman.
Yeah.
about the short-lived van-sploitation cycle of the 1970s, and there's like 4, 5, 6 different movies about vans that were made in the late 70s. I watched this movie a second time afterwards. It's a one-hit wonder. You get everything out of Supervan that you can get out of Supervan in the first viewing. But it's about a guy who's going to a van competition in St. Joseph's, Missouri.
A van competition?
A van competition, a van celebration.
Okay.
It's basically a party with people that own vans. And
Okay.
they have various competitions. Can your van get up this steep incline? Do you have neat things painted on your van that our judges can judge? And he saves this girl from being raped. The tone is kind of weird in this movie. But his van gets destroyed in the process. But he's got a buddy that works for a company that makes vans, and he's got a prototype super van that has lasers for no apparent reasons in it. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. And extremely 1977. I'm still going to give it a thumbs up. But I still kind of want to force you to see Supervan at some point. 1978, Avalanche, which is another Corman film. It was supposed to be their entry into legitimate disaster movie making, but it didn't make as much money as their other 1978 release, Piranha. This has got Rock Hudson, and it's got Robert Forster, and a number of other people, and there's this mountain in Colorado that had this horrible avalanche back in the gold prospecting days, so nobody had bothered to build a ski resort. But Rock Hudson thinks he can build a ski resort there and have a big opening celebration. And as for all 1970s disaster films, you have disaster. You have an avalanche and people die, and it's horrible. And it's not a very good movie. So thumbs down. 1979, And Justice for All. This is a Norman Jewison film, Al Pacino, about a lawyer that's just really trying to do the right thing and how people are screwed over by the justice system. And he has an opportunity to potentially get a client off, but he has to compromise with a corrupt judge, and he has to decide, where do I draw my line? Like, what's the bigger evil? How much can I compromise? It's really solid. 1980, The Formula. So, And Justice for All got a thumbs up. Formula gets a thumbs down. It's got George C. Scott in it, who is a World War II veteran and a Los Angeles police detective who gets roped into this case involving some deaths that end up being related to efforts by the oil industry to cover up a process that the Nazis had invented late in the war to turn coal into oil that would be very bad financially to the oil companies. And Marlon Brando plays this oil company executive who's basically Dick Cheney before Dick Cheney. And it's a really interesting performance. He's got a very distinct voice. He's morally ambiguous. It's unlike any other character I've seen Marlon Brando play. And it's one of those instances where you realize he really was great. He really could do so much, even though he was an extremely difficult person to work with. So see the Marlon Brando scenes in The Formula, but you can just ignore the rest of it. So thumbs down. The Image of the Beast, 1981. This is another one of those Rapture films that started with A Thief in the Night. This is actually the third one. They just kind of keep getting more ridiculous. You don't really need to see the later ones. So I'm going to thumbs down this one. Burden of Dreams, 1982, which is about the making of Werner Herzog's film about the opera. Fitzcarraldo, the film about the opera in the jungle. This is good. I mean, it's just a crazy shoot, and that's something that's been fairly consistent over Herzog's directing career. So it's an interesting story. 1983, Prodigal Planet, another Rapture film. This is the worst of them. Thumbs down. Though there's certain periods in which it kind of wants to be The Walking Dead.
Yeah.
1984, Chud. These are cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers living in the sewers of New York City, and it's bad. 1985, we've done an episode on. It was part of a month. A Jackie Chan month. It is Police Story.
Yeah.
Thumbs up to Police Story. 1986, we also did an episode on Chopping Mall. Thumbs up to Chopping Mall. 1987, Throw Mama from the Train. I was really looking forward to seeing this movie. It's not very good.
No. Why were you looking forward to it?
Well, because it's Danny DeVito and Billy Crystal, and they're going to throw the old lady from Goonies off of a train. That
Yep.
sounds fun. This movie should be fun. It's not. It's boring and slow.
Yep.
I always thought that it had a reputation. I thought it was going to be good. I was really disappointed. It might be the most disappointed I've been with a movie this year.
Wow.
So thumbs down.
That's saying something.
1988, a short film about killing. This was made for Polish television in the 80s. And there was a period in which you had some great artistic achievement in Polish film late in the communist period. And this is about a guy who goes out and he's trying to get money so that him and his girlfriend can go on a trip out to the country and get away from the dirty city tenements where they live. And he decides he's going to rob this taxi driver. And we've seen the taxi driver, and the taxi driver's an a-hole. He's a crappy man. But he's brutally murdered. And you see basically all of it. He's strangled, and then he has to go back and finish him off. And it's just it can be hard to kill a guy. Like you keep trying to kill him, and he keeps not dying, and it just gets more horrible. And you hate this guy. You hate the guy that's killed. You hate the guy that kills him. And then he's got this lawyer, and him and the lawyer are actually in the same restaurant earlier that day. There's a little scene. And then later the lawyer's like, I think I saw that guy. And this is his first time with a big defense case. And he is doing everything he can to save this guy's life. And you hate this guy. By the end, you are almost crying that they're going to execute him. Once you find out more about his background, it's a very empathetic film. I had to watch it a second time. It was very, very good. So thumbs up to a short film about killing. 1989 Roadhouse. Have you seen Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze?
Just parts of it, not the whole thing.
It's fun. It's silly. It's got Sam Elliott in it. It's about bouncers at the most improbably crime-ridden club in small-town Missouri.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's also the favorite film of Crow T. Robot on Mystery Science Theater 3000.
There you go.
1990 Fear. This is a film starring Ali Sheedy from The Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
Ali Sheedy is a likable lady, but they freaking couldn't figure out what to do with Ali Sheedy. This film was intended to be theatrically released, but it was ultimately released on Showtime, but I don't believe it. Because I've seen this film. There's no way they intended to release this thing thematically. It's just not good enough. She is a psychic who can help the police solve crimes, and there's another psychic that has figured out that she's a psychic and is kind of like tormenting her and like threatening to kill people she loves because, I'm a psychic. It's too easy. So finally it's the Joker Batman kind of thing. It's like, I live to torment you. And the freaking thing ends with a fight in a carnival, including a race through a hall of mirrors. It is the laziest GD thing that you've seen. It's not good. Thumbs down. 1991, Operation Condor.
Yeah.
We also did an episode on. Thumbs up to that. As with 1992, Super Cop.
Yeah.
Thumbs up. 1993, The Band Played On, which is about the early medical efforts to combat AIDS, HIV, in the 80s when it was just starting to be known that it even existed. And this group that came up with some of the early treatments for it and the oppositions they faced. And it's got a really big all-star cast. It's an HBO film.
Yeah.
I would recommend. 1994, we did an episode on Rockwell, The Legend of the American West.
That's probably the best thing that came out of that episode is it checked something off.
It checked something off, yeah. Legends of the Wild West. So thumbs down to Rockwell. Thumbs up to 1995's A Rumble in the Bronx.
Yep.
Which we've done an episode on. Thumbs down to 1996's Omega Doom with Rutger Hauer, which is a confused Blade Runner wannabe post-apocalyptic film that came in a 2 DVD set with Blind Fury. Blind Fury is awesome, but Omega Doom is not. 1997, In and Out with Kevin Kline. Have you seen this one?
I don't think so.
You remember Tom Hanks gave a speech at the Oscars for Philadelphia where he basically outed his high school drama teacher?
Oh, yeah.
So this is a comedy that takes that as its premise, and the question is the guy really, really gay? And he's also just about to get married. And so they have he's not like Tom Hanks at all, but he's a guy who became an actor who wins an Oscar. outs his teacher on the broadcast a few days before his wedding, and hijinks ensues. It's actually really good. And it's got, of all people, Tom Selleck in it.
Yeah.
As a gay person, which is interesting. In 1998, There's Something About Mary.
You liked that.
I liked it. You did not.
No, I haven't seen it in a long time, but the one time I saw it, I didn't care for it.
This is one that I thought that I wouldn't like, because I thought it had been too kind of built up at the time, and it's very much a film of its time. There's also some gay humor in it that hasn't aged very well. I liked it. And I don't particularly care for Cameron Diaz, but she is quite winning in this film.
I like Cameron Diaz. I'm hit and miss with
Stiller.
Yeah, Ben Stiller.
And Matt Dillon. Matt Dillon hasn't had a particularly memorable career after this. 1999, My Best Friend Klaus Kinski. Werner Herzog's film about Klaus Kinski. And their long...
Best Fiend.
Yeah. So their long, complicated relationship. And the most interesting thing about this is that Herzog knew him when he was a little boy.
Yeah.
Because they had rented rooms in the same apartment building on the same floor in post-World War II Germany. And so he knew that this guy was a freaking crazy actor who was just temperamental and very difficult and caused all sorts of chaos, including locking himself in their bathroom for like a day.
Yeah.
And he's still like, now that I'm making films, I'd want to work with him, even knowing all this.
Yeah.
So it's a good film, but it's not a wide audience film. If you really like Kinski and Herzog, see it, but otherwise it's not going to have any appeal. So I would thumbs up it. 2000, Dr. T and the Women, which is a Robert Altman film with Richard Gere.
Okay.
Richard Gere is an obstetrician in Dallas. He looks like Richard Gere, so obviously he could get with any woman he wants, but he doesn't. He's very loyal to his wife, Farrah Fawcett, until Farrah Fawcett has a mental breakdown while shopping for their daughter's wedding and decides to go all Lady Godiva in the fountain at the mall. And so she's locked up and literally forgets who he is. And his friend at the country club has brought in this woman tennis pro played by Helen Hunt. And there's a chemistry there. And this is a man who's been profoundly decent his entire life and has sacrificed for other people his entire life. And is he going to do this selfish thing now? And is it a selfish thing? And then with the Robert Altman film, there's all these different side plots going on, including the fact that one of Richard Gere's daughter, the daughter who is getting married, is a lesbian and is really more interested in her maid of honor than in the guy that she's supposed to be marrying.
Yeah.
It's very good. The ending, I can see how people would have issues with the ending, but I quite liked it. So thumbs up for that. 2001, Hearts in Atlantis. This is an adaptation of one of the short stories in the Stephen King anthology book of the same name. Anthony Hopkins is this mysterious man who rents a room in 1960 in, I forget where this is set. I don't think it's set in Maine, which is unusual for Stephen King. But he rents a room and befriends this young kid, and he's hiding something mysterious and mystical. It's good.
Yeah.
So thumbs up. 2002 Swim Fan. This has got Erica Christensen and Sherry Appleby and the guy that played Josh's intern on The West Wing in the fifth season, who was referred to on online forums as Swimturn. So Jesse something. He was also in Flags of Our Fathers.
Okay.
He's decent. It's kind of a love... It's
Jesse Bradford.
It's basically... Is Basic Instinct or what's the one with Glenn Close? Is the nanny that goes crazy and is in love with her employer?
I'm not familiar with that one.
It's basically that. So the new girl in school, Erica Christensen, becomes obsessed with the star swimmer, and she might just be willing to kill his girlfriend in order to get with him. The reason I saw this is I remember seeing it, the preview for it, just all the time in theaters in 2002.
Yeah.
And it's just a cheesy, I want to say MTV produced it, kind of thriller, and it's just not very good, and it gets thumbs down. Also getting a thumbs down is 2003's Day of Defense. This is a Mormon movie about a couple missionaries in this town. I think it's supposed to be in Colorado, but it's very clearly in Utah. In fact, I feel like I've been to several locations in this film. And the local ministerial association wants to kick them out of the town, and so they have to defend themselves in court that they have a right to preach their religion in this community. It's based on a comic book,
Okay.
that I remember reading on The Mission. Because Elder Gardner had it, and when I was recovering from my sick spell at Christmas 2000,
Yeah.
the last day that I was kind of sick I wasn't so much sick as I was just exhausted and needed to rest up. I read it, and I enjoyed it as a missionary, but it's really not enough material to make a movie. In fact, it's even laughable. The whole idea of this court case is ridiculous. It's a bad movie.
Its filming locations were Salt Lake City and Ephraim, so you certainly have been to some of the filming locations.
Part of it I thought might have even been Midvale.
It just lists Salt Lake City, but yeah.
No. So thumbs down to that. 2004, we also did an episode on it. I'm also going to give it a thumbs down. Closer.
Yeah.
Because I don't like anybody in that movie.
Yeah.
They're all jerks.
I mean, I agree with that assessment, but I still would give it a thumbs up.
2005, Domino, Keira Knightley. This was written by Richard Kelly, who had just come off the success of Donnie Darko, and a thing that he has never been able to come close to replicating in his career. It had such promise to it. But this is based loosely on the true story of Domino Harvey, who was the daughter of the actor Lawrence Harvey from the original Manchurian Candidate. Lawrence Harvey died while making a film with Orson Welles, actually, when they were about 70% through shooting. And so the film was never released because you couldn't, because you needed Lawrence Harvey.
Yeah.
But his daughter went on to be a model, had a drug problem, decided she didn't like the world of modeling, but she could be a bounty hunter. And she was a female bounty hunter. And so this is a fictional story about the real Domino Harvey, who died shortly after this film wrapped production. It's also like a 19-year-old Keira Knightley who's just really trying to kind of shed her earlier image. You see a lot of Keira Knightley in this film. 2006, Snakes on a Plane.
Wow.
Which I totally enjoyed.
Which blows me away.
It is Roger Corman-esque. It's campy and silly, but it's fun.
Yeah.
And even the dated computer effects of the snakes are fun.
Yeah.
And of course, best known for some of the dialogue uttered by Samuel L. Jackson regarding his feelings about these such and such snakes on this such and such plane.
Yeah.
2007, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. It's based on a true story. This was so good that I bought the book that it was based on. There's a man, whose name I'm blanking, who was the editor of Paris Vogue magazine, I want to say. And he had a stroke while driving with his kid. And it paralyzed him, but it's this very specific type of stroke where he ultimately was completely aware of his surroundings, but he could hardly move. The only thing he could do is blink, and they had to cover up one of his eyes to keep it from being infected. So he could only blink through one eye, and they figured this out because he would, blink in response to things. And he wrote this book about his experience living in this condition. They came up with this system, because he actually had a book that he was supposed to write. It was supposed to be a completely different book, obviously, but it's like, I'm going to honor my contract. I'm going to produce a freaking book. And they got this list of all the letters in the French alphabet in order of how frequently they're used. And they would go through the letters, and then he'd blink when it got to the letter he wanted. And they would dictate it this way. It's like a 100-page book. And so he had to compose everything intricately in his mind, and it is beautifully written. And it's about how horrible this was, but how much he still wanted to live. And just the tiny little satisfactions he would get. The friends that would come to visit him and listening to them read to him, or hoping that the nurse didn't turn off the TV while the game was still on because he wanted to finish the game. And he ended up dying of infection that he probably would have not been an issue had he not been in this state.
Yeah.
And it's quite possible that he could have improved. Other people that have had this gradually have regained their other sensations to one degree or another. But it's a beautiful movie. It's a really strong lead performance by the guy who was the bad guy in the James Bond film where they go to Peru and they're having to deal with the oil and the water. It's the second of the Daniel Craig James Bond films, Quantum of Solace.
Yeah.
So that's good. Thumbs up to that. 2005, Righteous Kill, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro. Forgettable cop movie. They were too old to be making this. It's just not very interesting. Thumbs down. 2009, The Turn of the Screw. This got Michelle Dockery of Downton Abbey in an adaptation of the Henry James novel, The Turn of the Screw. It's been made into a movie many, many times. I'm going to give it a thumbs up, but the thumbs up really more for the story than for the particular adaptation. Like, see a version of The Turn of the Screw. It doesn't need to be this version. 2010, Virginia. This is written by the guy who wrote Milk and was one of the writer-producers on Big Love. I want to say Michael Ian Black, Thomas something Black. He's a gay Latter-day Saint.
Okay.
And I think it's loosely based on his childhood. And it's about a man whose mother is kind of a wreck, and she's played by Jennifer Connelly, and she is having an affair with, this is a community on the Virginia beach, having an affair with the local sheriff who's also who's LDS and is running for state legislature. And it's got a young Emma Roberts in it in one of her first films. It was filmed and it was held back for like 3 years before it actually got a release. And it's not very good. There's too much going on. And that happened with Big Love as well, which I never finished because there's just too much was happening. It became off-putting.
Yeah.
So thumbs down to that. 2011, The Lincoln Lawyer.
Yeah.
Thumbs up.
It's a solid film.
It feels like a pilot.
Well, so the Lincoln Lawyer novels, there's more now, but the lawyer Mickey Haller, there's like 5 books in that series, 5 primary works in that series. The Lincoln Lawyer is like number 3.
Yeah. It feels like there should be more.
Yeah.
Not necessarily as a TV series, but like it would have been kind of nice to see Matthew McConaughey do this character again in another movie or 2.
You know, it's Michael Connelly's a solid writer. I mean, if you're a fan of Bosch, it's the same writer, and he's writing on the same level that the subject material for Bosch is taken from, but it's about Mickey Haller, who's the Lincoln Lawyer.
I don't remember a lot of details about it because I saw it about a year ago.
There's more installments that have come out in this about Mickey Haller since. Like now there's a 6th novel about him. He continues to write with that character to this day, so yeah,
but
it's good.
But it's good. Yeah, it's good. It feels like, when we watch the Sherlock Holmes, it feels like it should be part of a series of films. 2012, so thumbs up to Lincoln Lawyer. 2012, Lawless, thumbs down.
Yeah.
This has got Shia LaBeouf. It's got Jessica Chastain. It's got Clark. What's his name?
Shia LaBeouf, Guy Pearce, Tom Hardy, Jason Clarke, Jessica Chastain, Mia Wasikowska. Yeah.
I just didn't feel it.
I liked this movie more than you. I don't think it's a great film. I thought you would have liked it a little bit better than you did.
I like the period setting. I like certain parts of it. Was it not John Malkovich, but
Tom Hardy or John Clark? Guy Pearce?
No. Older gentleman in the Harry Potter movies.
Oh, Gary Oldman? Yeah,
Gary Oldman. Gary Oldman was intriguing. I kind of wanted to know more about Gary Oldman's character.
Yeah.
It's okay, but it's just it's kind of overlong. The scene, so it's about bootleggers. It's based, I think, loosely on a true story about these bootleggers in Southern Virginia. And there's a point where Shia LaBeouf likes Mia Wasikowska, and she belongs to this kind of eccentric, they're snake handling religion, foot washing Baptist kind of group up in the country, and he goes in to one of their services to try to see if he can blend in, and obviously he can't blend in. Like, I want a movie about this group. It's like, this group's much more interesting than the bootleggers. Make a movie about these people.
Yeah.
So thumbs down to Lawless. 2013, Apocalypse Later, a documentary about Harold Camping, the preacher who predicted a 2013 date for the end of the world.
Yeah.
Follows him in the build-up to it and in the aftermath of it, and how eventually is like, well, I was wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess it's better than you saying you're not wrong, but
yeah,
it's interesting. He's actually, what got me about him was I kind of liked him, like yeah, because you'd think that that he'd be very like, you're all going to hell, but like he was really nice about it. Like he wasn't even like, it didn't even feel like he was trying that hard to convince people.
Yeah.
He's just like, I'm just putting it out there.
all of these conversations remind me of the Nickel Creek song, The 21st of May.
Yes. Yeah. So that, I would recommend that. 2014, That Guy, Dick Miller, bio documentary about Dick Miller, who was in freaking everything from Roger Corman on. If you like Dick Miller, it's fascinating. You get to see him in his home life, and he just seems like a real nice guy. And the joke was that he'd always say that he's retired, and then something would come up. Okay, I guess I'm not retired. I'm going to do this movie now. He's since passed on. 2015, we did an episode on Aloha.
Yeah. Which I'm surprised you didn't like, or that you actively disliked it as much as you did.
And it's funny because I was telling you before we were recording that just the other night I rewatched Almost Famous, which was another Cameron Crowe film, and I really like Almost Famous.
Yeah.
But I still, when I think of Cameron Crowe, I think of Elizabethtown, and I think of Aloha, and I think of the things where he's just too into himself, and it's off-putting. I definitely see the talent there, but it's a crowded mess.
I actually like Aloha, but yeah.
Thumbs down for me. 2016, Everybody Wants Some. They're college kids, so guess what the sum is that everybody wants?
It's pretty predictable.
So it is the first week of the 1980-81 school year at a college in Texas. It's a cast of basically nobodies. This is directed by the guy who did the Before Sunset, Before Sunrise, and Boyhood.
The director?
Yeah. Art Linklater.
Yep, Richard Linklater.
Richard Linklater, not Art Linklater. He did Kids Say the Darndest Things.
Yeah.
But Richard Linklater, this is good. This is 3 days in the life of these college kids that are principally on the baseball team. And I don't know who any of them are. I think a lot of them were probably local actors. The only person that I rarely recognized was the one real girl in the cast, who's Zoe Deutsch, who's charming in it. And it's about how this guy wants to like Zoe Deutsch. And it's got all sorts of things going on with the different kids on the team. And they have this one guy who gets called out in a practice and gets kicked out of the school because he's not actually a college student. He's 30 years old.
Wow. And
he's been traveling around faking his age so that he could play baseball.
Yeah.
It's just a fun movie. I highly recommend it. 2017, Let There Be Light is a Christian film with Kevin Sorbo, where he plays Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens type professional atheist who has a near-death experience and changes his life, and it's condescending, and I didn't like it. Thumbs down. 2018, Cold War. This is done by the same guy that did the film Ada from a few years earlier that won a Best Foreign Film Oscar. It's about a man, this is in Poland, and the film goes from the mid-1940s, just after the war, into the early 60s, and it's this guy who is hired by the government to be one of 3 people who run a troupe that does traditional ethnic dance that eventually starts to tour. And he falls in love with one of the girls in the group, but just circumstances kind of keep preventing them from getting together. And then eventually she defects out to the west. No, he defects. There's multiple defections. And then he has to sneak back. No, she marries an Italian, and so she gets to leave because she marries this Italian, but then they divorce, and then he leaves, defects to be with her, and then tries to launch her music career because she's pretty talented. But then she can't deal with it, and so she goes back across the Iron Curtain, and so he has to figure out how to sneak his way back in to Poland, and then of course he's sent to prison, and then she marries another guy and has his kid in order to have influence to get him released, and then leaves that guy, and it's just freaking crazy.
Yeah.
But it's really, really good. So I recommend it. 2019, we did an episode on the first 2019 film I saw in 2020 was Bombshell.
Yeah.
Which I recently revisited, and you had commented on that you hoped that this would be one that was
culturally would be something like
would be well remembered and be a touchstone, and I think it is. I just think it captures that Fox News moment.
Well, I had said I'd hope it would have the cultural impact of something like Spotlight.
Yeah.
I don't think it's had that impact.
And I don't think it probably should, because the scale of the hypocrisies are different.
That type of cultural impact in terms of it led to a lot of reckonings, and this should have led to more reckonings than it did.
But it just really seems to just capture the essence of that. And I would love to watch it with a QAnoner or a Fox News person and just see, what do you make of this? Because
You're friends with enough of them on Facebook.
I
Invite one
know.
over.
because I know that if this were somebody that worked, a Democrat, that you'd easily say, oh, it's horrible, horrible, horrible. But
Yeah.
because it's Fox News, you kind of get this, I don't want to say they're horrible. So that's good. And then 2020, the first film that I saw of 2020, in the year 2020, I did not see, and I wrote down the date, until the 25th of July. More than halfway through the year before I saw a 2020 release, and that was John Lewis, Good Trouble, biopic documentary about John Lewis, released right around the time he died.
Yeah.
I think I saw it about a week or two after he passed away. He's an impressive man.
Yeah.
This is a solid, if not exceptional, documentary. It doesn't really go anywhere you haven't seen a documentary go before. You got the flashback sequences with the archival footage and the photographs, and they follow John Lewis around with a camera for a couple of years. And he is a very likable guy. And one of the motifs that I think I mentioned before is people were always stopping him to talk to him. And he would always take that time, and they interviewed his son. It's like, what was it like traveling with your father? So we had to get to the airport so early.
Yeah.
Because he'd stop and talk to everybody. So
Yep.
anyway, I completed that weird goal of mine.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll ever do that again.
You finished it relatively early in the year,
I
too.
finished it in August.
Yeah. You, cranked that out.
I cranked it out.
Yeah. I think some of these you went back and saw movies from those years that you prefer to have listed.
Yeah.
But
I think that's safe to say about probably half of these.
yeah. Well, in terms of this recording, you failed.
I did fail. Oh, well, I don't know. Once we edit it.
It'll still be over an hour. I'll bet there's 5 to 7 minutes in edits.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
Indeed.
Yeah. How do you cover 90 movies that quick? So,
I know. I think I did a pretty good job.
yeah. I just had to harass you because I can. So, I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And this is Rob and Nate Record a Podcast.